Yeah. So I think last kind of point we want to hit is a little preview on the schedule. Uh, I believe, yeah. Jaden, I have some thoughts about it, but I mean, if you want to go where you think this is easy, where you think the schedule's hard. Quick thing, Miami does not leave the state of Florida until their 8th game of the season when they go to SMU. I think that's a huge benefit where, travel won't necessarily impact Miami up until, you start to hit your stride in the middle of the year. So what do you think about the schedule looking at it?
So I think about this. I've been thinking about it quite a bit actually. So the first all you have to look at is the first 4 weeks of the season. So that's Notre Dame, Bethune-Cookman, USF, and UF. Weeks 2 and 3 you can probably chalk up as wins. So then you look at Notre Dame and UF. I've been saying this kind of from the start that you in an ideal world, probably in a realistic world, Miami splits one of the probably those two games. They go 1-1, and that's if you go 1-1, I can live with that. We can live with that. And then you go FSU on the road. It's automatically a tough game. I know you got the 2 byes, but it is always a tough game when you do go up to Tallahassee, no matter which version of FSU you're playing. Um, I would honestly look at in terms of what might scare me is the last 2 games of the season, truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
The ending of the season at Virginia Tech, at Pitt to end the season, to me, that kind of scares me a little bit. It seems like a trap game. One of those 2 games, Virginia Tech and Pitt, both Big East rivals. They're 2 teams that they're playing the cold. You're gonna play some gritty football up there. It's definitely games that you're looking as a Miami fan, you're saying, if we're a one-loss team and we're kind of on the bubble of the CFB at large, I really don't want to lose this game, especially against a team like Virginia Tech or Pitt. So those 2 games do scare me because they're both on the road back to back. But if we're looking at in terms of the schedule, the it's unbelievable that Miami doesn't leave the state of Florida until November, until
Yeah,
week 10. It's unbelievable. Love,
huge benefit for Miami there.
yeah, it's an
Huge benefit.
incredible benefit that they have, and I think that I think it's a favorable schedule based on how it is, but I don't the end of the season, the last 2 games, they scare me.
Yeah, definitely those last 2 games are scary, and I think Miami because they have the benefit of hosting two of their hardest opponents between Notre Dame and Florida. You think 2 of their 3 hardest opponents, depending on what you think of SMU, what you think of depending on what you think of SMU or Florida State's back, maybe not, but Florida and Notre Dame, you host both those games at home is a huge benefit, and then the early half of the season, you have the 2 byes between after Florida going into SMU, where even though you have to travel into hostile territory, you have a week off before you do it. And then after that, a Louisville team that was very competitive against Miami last year, you have a bye week after that FSU game to kind of recover and get back. But yeah, that back half of the season, I think is very scary for Miami just because no buys, straight week after week after week, you're going through these teams, and the last 2 games being on the road, as when the season's at the end, when you're towards the end of the regular season, maybe the team's a little bit banged up, a little bit injured. You're fighting for a playoff spot. You're fighting to play in the ACC championship game, which I think it's so important for Miami to kind of not drop any of these games in the middle. Like you can't drop. Like I know it's tough to say, just go into Tallahassee and win. It's a rivalry game. It's a big game. FSU's not very good. It wasn't very good last year, but still, you can't drop that game. You can't drop anything as you lead up because I feel like kind of as we saw last year, where Miami started to slip towards the end of the year. Um, when the season's kind of winding down and you're fighting for these teams. These teams equally want to just kick Miami out of the playoffs. I mean, we saw Syracuse relish in the fact that they were able to kick Miami out of the playoff because of that last second, the late season win. Kind of racking up as many victories as possible before you hit that back end of the season. You're on the road back to back weeks, and you're playing a bunch. Like you want to kind of keep Miami as high of a record as possible, which but like you want to kind of string together as many victories as you can. And even though that week 1 in Notre Dame might be tough, that's probably a must win just because it's going to buy you a lot of credit. It's going to buy you a lot of credit when you get to the late back end of the season.
Yes, 7 straight games is not easy for anyone, and that, I mean, the I don't like the bye week, FSU bye week. I think that's actually really bad for Miami, because I mean, end the season with 7 straight games, and the last 2 being Virginia Tech and Pitt are just not. It's not easy for them. They're going to be games that on paper may look fine, but they're not going to be easy games. They're going to be trap games or games that you can see Pitt, Coach Narduzzi having like. Pat Narduzzi wants nothing more in life than to be a pester to a team. He would love to beat Miami. Virginia Tech and Miami have been playing each other for over 40 years. You think they don't want to beat them? Of course they do. So you're looking at that and you're like, okay, those are 2 really tough games. And I think I'm thinking about this a lot, that if Miami were to start, say, their first 6 games, say they went 5-1, and then their last 6 games they went 5-1. Would you be okay with that at 5-1, 5-1? That's a 10-2 season with 1 ACC loss would set them up for the ACC championship game.
If it got Miami a berth in the ACC championship game, 100%. But that,
Say,
yeah. So like
like
if the
say
one of those 2 losses were the Notre Dame
yeah.
loss or the Florida loss, and in the back half of the season, maybe you lose to SMU, maybe you lose a lot, a game to Pitt or Virginia Tech.
Mhm.
I think just because the ACC isn't the strongest out when you're not when Clemson isn't on the schedule, that Miami kind of needs to buy wins, not buy wins, but get some wins to buy some credit
Yeah.
with the AP polls and like with the college football rankings, so that they can have honestly, I think there's a way where you would rather get upset in the middle, have one of those games be like a loss to Louisville or Florida State, than one of those be a loss to a top ranked team, in the sense of like, if you have wins against those top ranked teams, that game feels more of like a slip up game where like Notre Dame's had credit even though they lost week 1 to blanking on the team, but they lost that rough week.
NIU.
Yeah, and that game against NIU, because they racked up as the season went on, racked up a bunch of solid victories. They were able to kind of hold their record high and kind of keep themselves up keep themselves afloat in the college football rankings. So I think Miami really needs to win those 2, the Notre Dame game and the Florida game,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I think it's just to establish yourself as a real threat early on, so you can buy yourself that credit later on the season in case you slip up.
Well, so would you prefer then that Miami has a 2-loss ACC season, as in like they have 2 losses within their own conference, and that maybe they get kicked out of, they don't make the ACC championship game? Does then what I feel like then Miami wouldn't even have a chance to even
That's
put
fair.
themselves there.
You got a great point.
If they were to split to Notre Dame and UF, but they were to lose one other in conference game and then finish the season with an ACC championship game, it sets them up for the fact that if they just beat whoever they face, assuming it's Clemson, they're a win and they're in. Obviously,
Mhm.
not an easy game with Clemson, but at least you have that ability where you can control your own destiny. If you're a 2-loss team in conference with Notre Dame and UF games, they're going to look really good on the schedule. They are. They're going to look really good. But there are concerns that you have to trust a committee to say, okay, Miami did lose to these 2 teams, whatever ACC teams they are. I'd imagine it's maybe SMU and then one of Virginia Tech and Pitt. If you look at that, and then the committee's like, okay, but they did beat Notre Dame, UF, and FSU. That's 3 great wins. Are you able to be like, are they able to just give Miami that at-large bid? That's the question that I always
Yeah,
go
and
back
I
on.
you have a great point in that, because I think I'm kind of flipping towards your side now that I think about it. Just because SMU and Clemson, when they made that the conference championship, like Clemson was, unless they got dominated in that game, a lock, because how are you going to put a team like Miami over Clemson when Clemson's the one that made the conference championship and Miami didn't? I think
Mhm.
that I think the must is to make the conference championship, but yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there.
Well,
I
so
think you have to
I'd
make the
actually
conference
argue,
championship, and so like if one of those losses are to Notre Dame and Florida, I think you can't rely on the committee to kind of sneak Miami in, unless they're a dominant team
yeah.
to flip up wherever. But like,
Well, so I'd argue that it's odd because I Clemson if Clemson didn't beat SMU, I don't know if they get in. One thing I do, because they were they finished the season as the number 12 seed, or was it
Hmm.
12 seed? Yeah, they were the number 12 seed in the CFP. So you have that, and then you have. I'm looking at it and I'm saying to myself, like, well, how did the committee do it last year? Where they worried on what the team's wins were, and they kind of ignored what a team's losses were. So Bama had like this really strong reputation because they had beaten LSU and they had played well against Tennessee and Georgia, all those schools. They beat Georgia, but they lost to Vanderbilt, but they lost to whoever. And that kind of was like, that was their argument. And that argument almost got them in. So
Hmm.
I'd argue that if the committee kind of thinks in that same way, maybe you are okay with not making the championship game, but you beat Notre Dame and you beat UF, but you have 2 ACC losses.
Yeah, I just think just the way, you know, it's hard if you're in the committee, but I think just the way they're at times the fact that they're inconsistent. I just think it's it getting into the conference championship. I think is not a lot easy, a lot easier of a way to get yourself a bid than to rely on the committee
Oh yeah,
to get yourself in. When I think,
absolutely.
especially currently, they're probably going to want to include more Big Ten teams, more SEC teams, teams that are looked as, you know, conferences that are looked as stronger than the ACC currently. Where we looked at it last year, we thought Miami was better than, you know, the last team in. I think it was we. I'm blanking on who was that last team that they let in. But the problem is, were they going to let 3 ACC teams in? Probably not. I think it's probably better for Miami to establish itself and to fight for the conference, and so make sure you win all your conference games and get to that conference championship, rather than necessarily taking those out of conference games and winning those, but not coming away with the conference itself, because you slip up here and there, and then you don't, you know, you're. I think getting into the conference championship gives you a better pathway to make the playoff than not, but having some extra wins. I think relying on the committee to make the decision is a little bit like you can't really trust them all the time. And unless Miami is a super dominant team throughout the season who just slips up in a couple of games,
Hmm.
then it's gonna be hard for me to fully believe that the committee's just gonna let Miami in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at it right now, trying to see who Miami didn't get in when I think so. Miami was the second team out,
Mhm.
and if Clemson loses to SMU, Alabama gets in.
Yeah.
So to me, I agree with that. That if you just control your own destiny, and if you win, you get an automatic bid. I feel like you can't go wrong with that, and I think you can kind of live with that and say, all right, we got the automatic bid. If and you can kind of live with just like you not having as many strong wins, but you at least have the ACC championship. So it's
Mhm.
this balance of like, would you rather control your own destiny or have this committee that you say it was extremely true? They're unbelievably like inconsistent. They have no idea. Like one year it's oh I you know we're ranking on wins, the other year ranking on losses, all that, and they definitely have a bias against the ACC, fair or not, regardless, they don't love the ACC. They don't at all, but they give them a bid. So if you win your conference, you get in, and I think that should kind of be at a minimum what Miami should be focusing on. Because if you win your conference, you get in, you get into the champion, you get into the CFP.